Hey, what's up? It's JR Noble here, and I'm in a new space, and it's time to make a new video. All right, so I actually had somebody who left a comment on one of my previous videos where I talked about how you can make boring chords more interesting, and she actually asked if I could do a video more around R&B chords, which is great because I've actually been doing a lot of my own homework and making chords and chord progressions and songs more in the style of R&B and using that kind of R&B flavor. Now there's 5 key elements I'm going to cover for making R&B chords, all right? And these are techniques that I've been using in other kinds of music as well. So this is something that is going to really help with making chords and chord progressions in the style of R&B music, but can be applied in a lot of different ways, all right? So let's get into it. Okay, so one of the first things that you're going to need to know is something called extended chords. And in order to talk about extended chords, we have to know what chords are. So just making sure that we're on the same page, because I'm not sure where you're coming in from. Let's just make sure that we're speaking the same language here. So chord is really just a series of notes all played at the same time. I'm going to turn this way now. All right, just a little music theory 101. If we start with C, the note just to the left of the 2 black keys. So that's C, and if we count and use that as number 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ran out of fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then the 8th note is right back to the C again. Okay, and so every note thereafter is then just another count. So we're counting up 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And it's important to know that because if we want to talk about extended chords, we need to understand the scale that we're playing in and then understand what just a basic chord is. So a basic triad chord or 3-note chord from C major is the C, the E, and the G, right? Pretty easy. And then if we add the 7th, so there we have a C major 7th, which is an extended chord. Okay, so we're just adding notes to the original 3-note chord. So adding things like 7ths and 9ths really start to give you that R&B kind of flavor and really start to make things sound a little bit more rich and a little bit more harmonically interesting. So that's a C major 7th, and that's a C major 9th. So we remove the 7th and just play the 9th. Now, if we only ever played C major 7ths and C major 9ths in that fashion, it's going to get pretty boring pretty quick. Just to make it a little bit more interesting, you'll find that a lot of R&B and gospel musicians, jazz players, they change up the chords, right? And the way they change up the chords is really interesting because what they do is they start to move those notes around either within the chord or just even outside of the chord, okay? And those are what are called inversions and sometimes suspended chords. And that leads me into the second key ingredient, which is suspended chords and inversions, okay? So if we add those in, we can now take that really generic C major 7th, C major 9th, and we can start to make it sound a little bit more interesting and a little bit more like an R&B chord. So let's take that C major 7th, for example. So if we take that 7th note, right, which would be the B in this case, and we take that and we move it down an octave, right? So we just take it from up here on the right and move it to the left. Okay, so now we have a C major 7th again, right? But it sounds like there's a little bit more tension there. And then if we take the C note and let's move that down an octave and we play those other notes that we were playing before. So that's the same exact chord as we started with. But you hear that because we added 2 inversions, it now sounds much different. So the first inversion being the 7th, and then the C. So if we do that, then we start to move things around a bit. So real quick, I want to show you an example of how these inversions are used inside of chords and chord progressions for R&B style songs, right? So what I'm going to show you is the chord progression for a song called Trip by LMI. Now the song Trip by LMI is in the key of B minor. So if we start with B minor is just B minor is actually just the same as D major. So the chord progression is this. And that's it. It just repeats over and over. So I'll break down really quickly what's going on there. So the producer of this song, Lawrence Dobson, goes by Rance. What he's doing is he's taking that very first chord, right? So the B minor, and he's adding a seventh to it. And all he did was he took the same thing that I just showed you earlier with that C major seventh, right? And we take the seventh note, move it down an octave. But instead of playing the B where it's at, we'll move the B down one octave. So then the first chord starts like this. So it's the same exact thing as what I showed you with the C major. There's just two inversions there. Now the second chord is a little bit easier. It only has one single inversion. So it's all in the scale of B minor. Start from E, and we count up in the scale of B minor, starting from E. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we make a 1, 3, 5 chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we add that seventh. So that's our E minor seventh chord. So then we just take the E, move it down one octave. And now we have the second chord, right? It's one inversion. And then the last chord, right? So they just play this chord again. And then they just move up into the F sharp. So the F sharp, if we build out that chord, start from F. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So then all they did after that was take the F sharp and move it down an octave. So another inversion. So the very first B chord has two inversions. The E chord has one single inversion. And then the F sharp chord has a single inversion. And you now have a three chord progression for an entire song that is a smash hit. And that's just how easy you can make an R&B chord progression using two simple techniques, which is the extended chords and some inversions. And just so you understand what suspended chords are, if we took that generic C major and we move the middle note around, so if we move that E down to the D, so that's a suspended chord. Or we can take that E and move it up to the F. Okay, and that gives us the ability now to create some tension and then give it some release. Doesn't it just feel good to hear that resolution there? And so tension and release is a really great technique to make use of inside of your chords and for your music, because we have tension and release throughout our entire day, right? We're building up tension, when we get frustrated because, somebody tells us we have to do some chores around the house or whatever. I'm getting frustrated at these guys using the grinder outside while I'm trying to record, right? Adding that tension into the music is what makes it feel real, right? It expresses the feelings that we're going through just throughout our day. So use that technique in your music, use those suspended chords, use those inversions to create the chords that are going to reflect and that emotion, the emotional journeys that we go through just in our day. Okay, so I have a couple of examples really quick just to show you of some chord progressions I came up with using some of these techniques that I've talked about already, just so you can get an idea of how else you can be using this. All right, so we can change the scale and play the stuff in different scales using these same techniques, right? So I have this one that's B minor, which is the same scale that I just showed you with LMI, but the chord progression is going to sound a lot more different because what you'll see here is the chords are a lot thicker, right? It's not just four notes like the LMI trip song, right? So there's a lot more, it's going to be a lot fuller sounding with the chords. So that gives you an idea of really how you can start to make these chords sound a lot fuller and more interesting just by adding in some of those techniques. So this next example, it's in G major. So major scales typically sound really upbeat and really happy, right? But we can still make it sound more R&B-ish. And then depending on the kind of vibe you want to set, you could use a piano, but you could also use some other sounds, right? So we could take this chord progression and make it sound more future bassy by adding it to a synth, or we can make it sound more mellow, more chill by adding it to like a Rhodes or some kind of keyboard like that. So there's lots of ways we can take these chords, and then use them in different ways. So for example, I'll take this G major and I'll just put it on this funky Rio scarb, just so you can hear what that sounds like. So it gives it a much different flavor and a much different vibe. Okay, so you're probably wondering, what happened to the other 3 techniques that you told me about at the beginning of this video? Well, in order to avoid making this an extremely long video, I'm gonna break this up into a second section. And if you got a lot of value out of this and you really enjoyed that, it really helped you out, drop a comment below to let me know what you liked best about this video, and if you're looking forward to part 2, right? Because that's gonna let me know if I should be creating more content like this. So be sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and click the little bell icon so that way you can get a notification of when I do upload the second part of this video series. Now, as an added bonus, when I hit 1,000 subscribers, I'm gonna give away a free MIDI chord pack with the R&B chords that you see in this session that I'm doing in these tutorials, and some extra chords in there as well. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, and as always, thank you for taking the time out to watch this video. I'm JR Noble, and I'll catch you again soon.